You people think the rules don't apply to you, don't you? Judge Franklin's voice cracked like a whip across the courtroom, echoing against the marble walls and the stale scent of disinfectant and coffee. Somewhere in that echo, a quiet promise was hiding. A promise that before this day ended, the man behind the gavel would regret every word that had just left his lips. It was a Tuesday morning in Jackson County Court, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. The air was thick with tekensentecuon, and the wooden benches groaned under the restless shifting of bodies. A dozen spectators, mostly lawyers waiting for their turn, sat in stiff rows, eyes darting between their phones and the scene unfolding at the front. At the defense table stood an elderly black woman, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge for balance. Her name, according to the file clutched in the clerk's hand, was Evelyn Carter, 68 years old, grandmother of 4, charged with contempt of court. Contempt, Judge Franklin repeated, rolling the word around in his mouth like it tasted sweet. He was in his late 50s, tall but heavy-set, with a face that seemed carved for scowling. His robes hung loosely, the collar of his white shirt stained faintly with coffee. His thinning hair shone under the light. You think you can stroll in here late? Speak over me and tell me how to run my courtroom. You think that's how this works, ma'am? Evelyn's lips trembled as she spoke. Your Honor, I wasn't trying to— Quiet, he snapped, slamming his gavel once hard enough that the sound made her flinch. You'll speak when I tell you to speak. Gasps rustled through the benches like wind through dry leaves. A young public defender sitting at the side table lowered her eyes, chewing her lip, but saying nothing. No one said anything. That was how it usually went in Franklin's courtroom. He was known for his temper, known for breaking young lawyers, embarrassing defendants, and running his sessions like a military drill. It made for quick hearings and terrified compliance, and that for him was order. Evelyn lowered her gaze. Her voice came out soft, apologetic. I was just explaining, sir, the bus was late and— Don't you sir me, he smirked. It's your honor. You people love to forget that. The words you people hung in the air like smoke. Even the court reporter's fingers froze for a split second above the keyboard. A long, uneasy silence followed. Franklin seemed to enjoy it. He leaned back in his chair, tugged at his cuffs, and continued. You've already wasted this court's time. You're lucky I don't hold you longer for your attitude. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Truly. I wasn't trying to disrespect you. I came as soon as I could. My granddaughter, she's sick. Franklin raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't need your excuses. You were ordered to appear at 9 o'clock sharp, and it's now 9:22. That's contempt. Period. He turned to the bailiff. Put that on record. The bailiff, a burly man with a shaved head and expressionless eyes, nodded silently. Papers rustled. Somewhere behind them, someone coughed. The sound of Evelyn's breath caught short, sharp, like a sob she refused to let escape. She was wearing her best church dress, a faded lavender piece with small embroidered flowers along the collar. Her hands, still steady despite their tremor, bore the faint marks of years of dishwater and labor. Around her neck hung a gold locket. Her hair, a crown of soft gray curls, was neatly pinned. She had dressed for respect, for dignity. Yet here she stood, a figure of humiliation under the glare of a man who had decided she was beneath him. Maybe, Franklin said, tilting his head with mock sympathy. Next time you'll think twice before waltzing into a courtroom like it's a Sunday picnic. Something in the gallery shifted. A middle-aged woman whispered to her seatmate, He's going too far. But no one intervened. They never did. The judge's wrath was like a storm, better to wait it out than be struck by lightning. Evelyn swallowed hard. Your Honor, please. Franklin's gavel cracked again. Enough. You'll have your chance to speak when I grant it. Until then, you will stand there quietly and learn some respect for this institution. He leaned forward, peering down at her from the bench. Do you even understand the seriousness of your situation, Mrs. Carter? She nodded faintly. Yes, Your Honor. Good, he said. Then you'll have no problem spending the afternoon in holding until you do. There was a collective intake of breath. Evelyn's knees seemed to weaken beneath her. Holding? She repeated, disbelief trembling in her voice. I didn't mean... You'll have time to think about that, Franklin said flatly. Maybe next time you'll show this court the punctuality it deserves. The bailiff moved forward, slow and deliberate. Evelyn's hands went to her chest. Please, she whispered. Please. I've never been in trouble in my life. I just wanted to explain. Ma'am, the bailiff said softly. Come with me. Franklin was already signing the order, his pen scratching across paper. This court runs on rules, not sympathy. If I start letting everyone play the victim, we'll have chaos. And I, for one, won't let this courtroom turn into a circus. Evelyn's eyes filled completely now, tears tracing down her cheeks as she looked at him, not with hatred, but with a kind of weary sorrow, a look that said she'd seen men like him before. Men who believed power made them untouchable. The bailiff touched her elbow, guiding her toward the door. She moved slowly, clutching her purse to her chest like it was a shield. The sound of her shoes' soft, careful steps echoed through the silent room. The onlookers avoided her gaze. Not one person spoke. At the door, she turned back. For just a moment, her eyes met the judge's. And though her voice was quiet, the words carried. You don't know who you're talking to. Franklin frowned, amused. Oh, I know exactly who I'm talking to, ma'am. Someone who doesn't respect the law. But her gaze didn't waver. No, she said. Someone, you'll remember. The bailiff opened the door and she stepped through. The door closed behind her with a hollow thud. Franklin chuckled under his breath, shaking his head as he returned to his docket. Next case, he barked. No one moved right away. The tension clung to the room, invisible but suffocating. The court reporter's hands resumed their rhythm, but her face was pale. The young public defender stared at the empty space where Evelyn had stood, her stomach twisting with guilt. Outside, in the hallway, Evelyn took a deep breath, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. Somewhere far above her, in the clean offices of City Hall, a phone was about to ring. A call that would change the entire tone of Judge Franklin's day. The news of the outburst spread faster than the courthouse coffee cooled. By noon, everyone in the Jackson County Justice Building was whispering about it, the morning Judge Franklin had put that old woman in her place. Some found it funny, others called it ugly. But everyone had heard. Inside courtroom 3B, Franklin sat like a king at his throne, tapping his pen against a fresh stack of case files. His mood had improved. The morning's display of authority had sharpened his ego to a fine point. The sight of Evelyn Carter's trembling hands still pleased him in a way he'd never admit aloud. He sipped his coffee and glanced toward the gallery. The usual crowd of defendants waited, young men in wrinkled shirts, mothers clutching folders of paperwork, a handful of public defenders trying to look awake. Routine, predictable, just the way he liked it. Let's move on, he said. Case number. But before the clerk could speak, the door opened. The bailiff entered, leading Evelyn back in. Murmurs rippled through the benches. She looked smaller now. Her shoulders slumped beneath that lavender dress. The faint scent of antiseptic clung to her, the smell of holding cells and disinfected concrete. She carried her purse pressed tightly against her chest, as if afraid someone might take it from her. Franklin raised a brow. "What's this?" "Your Honor," the bailiff said carefully. "Mrs. Carter has been released from holding at the request of her attorney." "Attorney?" Franklin scoffed. "Since when?" The door swung open again and a young woman hurried in, heels clicking sharply. She wore a navy suit too crisp for the humid southern morning and carried a binder under one arm. Her hair was tied neatly back, her eyes steady. "Good morning, Your Honor," she said, voice polite but firm. "Rebecca Jameson representing Mrs. Carter." Franklin leaned back. "Representing?" He laughed dryly. "This is a contempt matter, Ms. Jameson, not a murder trial." "Even contempt deserves counsel, sir," she replied, with a subtle emphasis on sir. The courtroom murmured again, soft, cautious amusement mixed with shock. Few people ever dared to speak to Judge Franklin that way. He smiled thinly. "You've got nerve, Ms. Jameson. You know how I handle interruptions?" "I've read the reports," she said. "Then you should know better." Her gaze didn't falter. "Mrs. Carter's rights were violated this morning. She wasn't given the opportunity to explain herself before being detained." Franklin's face hardened. "Violated?" "I followed procedure." "With respect, Your Honor," Rebecca said, "procedure doesn't include yelling at a 68-year-old woman for missing a bus." The words landed like stones in still water. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Franklin's jaw clenched. "Watch your tone, counselor." "I'm watching it," she said. "And I'm watching how you treat my client." He pointed his pen toward Evelyn. "Your client disrespected this court." Evelyn's voice, faint but steady, broke through. "I didn't mean to, Your Honor. I swear I didn't." "Mrs. Carter," Franklin said, "you were late. You interrupted me. You refused to answer." "I couldn't hear you," she said softly. "My hearing aid battery died." The courtroom went silent. Franklin blinked. "What?" "I wasn't trying to interrupt," she said. "I just didn't hear." For a long second, even the bailiff seemed unsure where to look. Rebecca spoke carefully. "Your Honor, my client suffers from mild hearing loss. If you'd allowed her to explain—" "I don't need a lecture," Franklin snapped. But the confidence in his voice was fraying now. He flipped through his papers, pretending to read. The murmurs behind him grew louder. Someone whispered, "She couldn't hear him?" Another replied, "He didn't even ask." The tension thickened. Franklin cleared his throat. "Regardless, lateness is still contempt." Rebecca tilted her head. "Contempt of what, Your Honor? Of your schedule?" Gasps, a few stifled laughs. Franklin's face went red. "Bailiff!" he barked. "Order in the court!" The bailiff raised a hand, and the noise died down. Evelyn looked around, terrified, clutching her locket. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want no trouble." Franklin exhaled through his nose. "Fine, fine. We'll proceed properly, but I'll remind you, Mrs. Carter, you're walking a thin line." Rebecca nodded. "Understood. We're just asking for fairness." He smirked. "Fairness, huh? You must be new to this county." The clerk looked up, startled. The court reporter hesitated again. Every word was being recorded. Every sneer, every sarcastic remark. Rebecca's tone stayed calm, but her jaw was tight. "Fairness shouldn't be a foreign concept anywhere, Your Honor." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Franklin stared at her, weighing whether to explode or retreat. Then with a forced laugh, he said, "You've got fire. I'll give you that. But you're not going to turn my courtroom into a soapbox. Now sit down." She sat, folding her hands in her lap. Her glance toward Evelyn was soft, reassuring. "It's okay," she mouthed. Franklin shuffled his papers. "Let's settle this quickly. Mrs. Carter, you'll pay a fine of $200 for tardiness and court disruption." Failure to pay within 30 days will result in further action. Understood? Evelyn blinked, stunned. 200? I can't. Next case, Franklin said. But before he could dismiss, Rebecca stood again. Objection. The fine is excessive, given the nature of the delay and my client's financial status. Franklin slammed his gavel. Sit down. She didn't. Your Honor, this is disproportionate and punitive. My client is a retired school teacher on a fixed income. She came here to clarify a parking ticket, not to be humiliated. The judge's face twisted. You're out of line. And you're out of compassion, she said. The crowd murmured louder now. Whispers of good for her mixed with nervous chuckles. Franklin stood, his voice rising. I won't be disrespected in my own courtroom. Rebecca raised her hands. Then show us what respect looks like. For a moment, chaos threatened to break loose. The bailiff moved between them. Evelyn sat frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the noise. Finally, Franklin pointed at her attorney. You're on thin ice, counselor. One more word, and you'll be in contempt next. Rebecca said nothing, but the look in her eyes promised she'd remember every word. The courtroom slowly quieted. The tension didn't fade. It just settled into the bones of everyone present. Franklin slumped back into his chair, pretending to refocus on the paperwork, but his hands shook slightly. Evelyn sat still, eyes fixed on the polished wood of the table. Shame and anger swirled inside her chest. She wanted to disappear. Yet beneath the trembling, something in her heart began to stir. A quiet, steady flame. Outside, when the session adjourned, reporters were already waiting. Someone had leaked the story. Someone had filmed part of it on their phone. A shaky clip of Judge Franklin shouting at an elderly black woman was already spreading through social media. As Evelyn stepped out into the sunlight, shielding her eyes, she could hear the whispers from strangers. That's her. Poor lady. Did you hear what he said? Rebecca guided her gently down the steps. We'll appeal, she said. We'll make this right. Evelyn nodded faintly, but her eyes weren't on the lawyer. They were on the horizon, beyond the courthouse dome, toward City Hall, where she knew her son would be finishing his lunch about now. The mayor of Jackson County, and the man who loved her more than anyone in the world. Evelyn Carter sat at her kitchen table that night, the dim light of a single lamp spreading a warm, fragile glow across her hands. The lavender dress still hung on her, creased and weary, like it too had survived a battle. Her teacup sat untouched. The clock ticked above the refrigerator, each second too loud. The courthouse humiliation replayed in her mind, each echo sharper than the last. The judge's sneer, the gavel's crack, the muffled laughter from the benches, and that one phrase that had sliced through her heart. You people think the rules don't apply to you. She'd heard that tone before. A lifetime ago, in classrooms and grocery stores, from men in uniforms and women behind counters. It was a tone she thought the years had outgrown, a tone she thought she had buried beneath her quiet strength and her faith. Her hands, knotted with age but steady now, folded over the gold locket at her throat. Inside was a photo of her husband, Charles, smiling in his Sunday best. He'd passed 15 years ago, leaving her with 4 grandkids and a garden that still bloomed because she couldn't bear to let it die. On the wall hung a framed photograph, a young man in a dark suit, one hand raised in oath, the state seal shining behind him. Her son, Marcus Carter, being sworn in as mayor of Jackson County. She remembered that day, the pride swelling in her chest, the crowd cheering his name, his promise that he'd bring dignity and fairness to their city. Evelyn smiled faintly, though the memory ached now. He'd be furious if he knew what happened today, she thought, and then the guilt returned, heavy as stone. She didn't want him to know, didn't want to burden him with her shame. The phone on the table vibrated. She jumped, blinking away the tears that had gathered. "Hey, Mama," came Marcus's voice, calm but warm. "You okay? You missed lunch with me today. I was worried." Her voice trembled. "I'm fine, baby, just tired. Had to deal with some courthouse business." "What courthouse business?" His tone sharpened immediately. Evelyn hesitated. "It was just a mix-up over a parking ticket, that's all." "Mama," he said slowly, "you sound off." "What happened?" She stared at her tea, the reflection of the kitchen light trembling on the surface. "Nothing I can't handle." Marcus didn't buy it. "Did somebody say something to you?" "No," she said quickly, then sighed. "It's just, the judge was, well, he was unpleasant, that's all." A pause. She could almost hear his frown through the phone. Which judge? She hesitated again. She wanted to protect him from this, but the truth pressed at her chest like a weight. "Franklin," she whispered. Another pause, then quieter. "Judge Franklin yelled at you?" "I was late," she said, softly. "The bus ran behind, and he thought I was being disrespectful." "Mama." His voice dropped into that dangerous calm she recognized from his campaign debates, the tone that came right before the storm. Did he say something racial? Evelyn closed her eyes. "I don't want you making a fuss." That's not an answer. Her silence was the answer. Marcus exhaled hard. "I'm coming over." "No, you're not," she said quickly. "You've got work. I'm already in the car." She tried to protest, but the line had already gone dead. The knock came 15 minutes later, quick and sharp. Evelyn rose slowly and opened the door. Marcus stood there, still in his mayoral suit, tie loosened, eyes blazing. Behind him, a city vehicle idled at the curb. "Mama," he said softly, "tell me exactly what happened." She led him inside, poured him tea, and told the story in halting sentences. The lateness, the shouting, the contempt charge. When she repeated the judge's words, "You people think the rules don't apply to you," Marcus's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened around the teacup. "He put you in holding?" "For an hour or so," she said. "He said I needed to learn respect." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing. "Respect," he muttered. "That man has no idea who he's talking to." "Marcus," she said gently, "don't make it worse." "It's already worse," he said, turning toward her. "He humiliated you in open court. That's not just disrespect, it's abuse." She gave a tired smile. "I've been through worse, baby. You know that." "I know," he said, voice cracking slightly. "But you shouldn't have to still go through it." He stared at her, the woman who had raised him on double shifts, who had worked 2 jobs to put him through law school, the woman who'd marched for civil rights when she was barely older than his youngest staffer, the woman whose kindness could calm any storm, except maybe this one. He knelt beside her chair. "Mama," he said, "I've spent my whole career talking about fairness, about reform. But I didn't know it would come to this, that the fight would land on my own doorstep." She reached out, brushing his cheek. "You don't need to fight my battles." He looked up, eyes fierce. "I think maybe I do." Later that night, after Marcus left, Evelyn sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker beyond the trees. She thought about her life, the small triumphs, the quiet endurance. She'd grown up in Mississippi in the 1960s in a world that taught her early what silence could cost. She'd seen her father dragged out of a diner for sitting in the wrong section. She'd learned to walk tall, even when her voice shook. When she became a teacher, she'd promised herself that her students, especially the little black girls, would always feel seen, heard, respected. Now, sitting alone, she felt that old ache of helplessness again. But beneath it, Something steadier pulsed a familiar resolve. Maybe this wasn't just about her. Maybe it was about what that courtroom still represented, about every woman who had been told she was too loud, too late, too much. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Rebecca, her lawyer. "Mrs. Carter, are you watching the news?" She turned on the television. There it was, the shaky cell phone footage. Judge Franklin, red-faced, yelling. Her own small, quivering voice saying, "I wasn't trying to disrespect you." The camera caught the moment his gavel slammed, the audience's uneasy silence. The clip had over 1,000 shares already. The caption read, "Elderly black woman, berated by Jackson County judge." Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. She felt exposed, raw, but also strangely vindicated. The world could finally see what she'd felt. On screen, reporters spoke over headlines. Public outrage is growing tonight after a viral video shows Judge William Franklin shouting at a local grandmother in court. The woman, identified as Evelyn Carter, was detained for contempt. Mayor Marcus Carter has yet to comment. She turned off the TV, heart pounding. She knew that look in Marcus's eyes earlier. He would comment. And when he did, the storm would come. She looked out the window again, whispering softly, "Lord, give him strength." Then, after a pause, she added, "And give that man a conscience?" Across town, Judge Franklin poured himself a glass of scotch, unaware that his name was already trending. He leaned back in his recliner, smirking at his reflection in the darkened TV screen. "Some people just don't learn," he muttered. But in the morning, when the cameras would be waiting outside his courthouse, he'd learned that this woman wasn't just anyone, and that her quiet strength carried the weight of an entire city behind it. By morning, the courthouse was surrounded by flashing lights and microphones. The heat of late summer clung to the air, but the tension was hotter still. Reporters clustered along the marble steps, their voices overlapping in a storm of urgency. "Is it true she's the mayor's mother? Has Judge Franklin been suspended? Do we have a comment from City Hall?" Inside his chambers, Judge William Franklin was sweating. The blinds were drawn, but the noise outside leaked through the chants, the camera shutters, the dull roar of outrage. He loosened his tie, glaring at his phone as if he could intimidate the notifications into silence. His name was everywhere. Judge Franklin, Evelyn Carter, Justice for Grandma trending on every social platform. He scrolled, jaw tightening as he read the captions under the viral video. "Power-drunk judge humiliates elderly black woman. Mayor's mother screamed at by racist judge. This is what justice looks like in Jackson County." He tossed the phone on his desk, the sound sharp. "Nonsense," he muttered. "Out of context nonsense." The door opened. His clerk, a young woman in glasses, poked her head in nervously. "Sir," the presiding judge called again. "They're asking for a statement." "I don't owe anyone a damn statement," Franklin snapped. "The court operates on law, not mob emotion. Yes, sir, but—" He cut her off with a glare. "That's all, Miss Turner." She withdrew, closing the door quietly. Franklin exhaled, staring at his reflection in the glass cabinet. "It'll blow over," he told himself. "It always does." But this time, something felt different. The whispers weren't just courthouse gossip. They were citywide. He'd been in this game long enough to know how fast reputations burned when politics got involved. He poured coffee with shaking hands, spilling a few drops on the file beside him. "She's just another defendant," he muttered. "Just another late, entitled woman who thinks the world owes her something." But even as he said it, the words tasted bitter. At City Hall, Marcus Carter was already standing at a podium before a wall of microphones. Behind him, reporters filled the briefing room. His expression was composed, but a pulse flickered in his jaw. He wore his mayoral pin and the same dark suit from the night before. "Good morning," he began. The cameras clicked rapidly. "I appreciate everyone being here on short notice." He took a breath. "I learned yesterday that my mother, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, was subjected to verbal abuse and unlawful detention during a court appearance presided over by Judge William Franklin. I have reviewed the footage personally, and I am outraged by what I saw." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus continued, voice steady but charged. "No citizen, elderly or young, black or white, should ever be spoken to that way by a representative of the law. That courtroom was not a place of justice yesterday. It was a place of humiliation." A reporter raised a hand. "Mr. Mayor, what actions are you taking?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I've requested a formal review by the State Judicial Conduct Commission. Additionally, I've asked that Judge Franklin be placed on temporary administrative leave pending investigation. Do you believe race was a factor?" He paused only a second. "I believe bias, conscious or not, has no place in justice, and I believe the people of this city deserve better." The room erupted with more questions, but he stepped back from the podium. The cameras followed him, flashing bright as he exited through the side door. Outside, Evelyn was watching the live feed from her living room. Her hands trembled around her tea. She'd begged him not to make it public, but seeing him there, speaking not just for her but for everyone who had ever been silenced, filled her with pride and sorrow all at once. She whispered, "Lord, guide him." Meanwhile, the courthouse lobby was chaos. Spectators gathered under the cold glow of fluorescent lights, holding signs printed overnight. "Respect our elders. Justice for Evelyn. No one above the law." Reporters pressed against the barriers, shouting questions at anyone in a suit. The bailiffs looked overwhelmed, trying to keep the crowd back. Rebecca Jameson pushed through the throng, clutching a folder. She'd barely slept. Since dawn, her phone had been ringing non-stop media requests, statements, even national outlets asking for comment. But she wasn't here for interviews. She was here for her client. Evelyn waited quietly in a small conference room upstairs. When Rebecca entered, she smiled faintly. "It's a lot, isn't it?" Rebecca exhaled. "It's a storm, Mrs. Carter. You're at the center of it." "I didn't want this," Evelyn said softly. "I just wanted to explain myself." "I know," Rebecca said. "But sometimes the things we don't want are the things that make change." Evelyn looked down at her clasped hands. "He looked right at me, you know. Like I wasn't even a person. Just something in his way." Rebecca sat beside her. "People like that think power makes them untouchable. But power doesn't protect you from truth." They shared a quiet moment. Outside, the chants grew louder. By midday, the courthouse security detail escorted Judge Franklin through a side entrance. The moment he appeared, the crowd erupted, jeers, boos, camera flashes like lightning. "Judge Franklin, do you regret your remarks? Was it racially motivated? Are you stepping down?" He kept his chin up, jaw clenched, ignoring the chaos. But inside, his pulse thundered. His staff flanked him, murmuring, "Just keep walking, sir." In the hallway, he spotted a camera crew filming near the courtroom doors. A young black cameraman aimed the lens directly at him, expression unreadable. Franklin's pace quickened. When he entered the courtroom, the silence was deafening. Every eye turned toward him, the reporters, the clerks, the attorneys. Even the portraits of past judges on the wall seemed to stare in judgment. He tried to proceed as if nothing had changed. "Court is in session," he declared. His voice sounded thinner than usual, almost brittle. But his authority had cracks now. People weren't afraid anymore. They were watching. Every tone, every word, recorded, scrutinized. He could feel the weight of their eyes pressing down like judgment itself. When a nervous defendant stood before him, a young black man in a wrinkled shirt, Franklin hesitated. The old instinct to bark, to dominate, wavered. The man looked terrified. Franklin opened his mouth, then closed it again. "State your case," he said quietly instead. The clerk blinked, startled. The shift didn't go unnoticed. The gallery whispered, and a single phone camera light winked on. Outside, Evelyn and Rebecca exited through a back corridor to avoid reporters. But a few journalists spotted them anyway. Mrs. Carter, do you have a statement?" Evelyn stopped, straightening her shoulders. The air smelled of rain, thick and electric. "I don't have anger," she said, voice calm but firm. "Only hope. Hope that what happened to me will open some eyes." Her words spread online within minutes. They called her the grandmother who spoke grace. But grace didn't stop the pressure building downtown. That evening, the governor's office released a statement. "We are deeply concerned by the events in Jackson County. An independent review will be launched immediately." Franklin read it on his office screen, hands shaking. His phone rang again. An unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but the message came through moments later, the voice unmistakable. "Judge Franklin, this is Mayor Marcus Carter. We need to talk." Franklin froze. His throat tightened. The realization hit him fully then, sinking into his gut like lead. He hadn't just yelled at any woman, he'd yelled at the mayor's mother, and for the first time in decades, the judge who prided himself on control felt the unmistakable sting of fear. The next morning, Jackson County woke up to war. Not a war of guns and soldiers, but of headlines, voices, and judgment. The courthouse steps had become a stage, and Judge William Franklin was the unwilling lead. Television vans lined the street. Protesters filled the plaza, their chants echoing off the marble facade. No justice, no bench. Franklin must resign. Dignity for Evelyn. The judge's name was painted across posters and hashtags, his photograph frozen mid-shout, mouth open, gavel raised. And beside his image, like a moral counterweight, Evelyn Carter's face, calm, dignified, resolute. The storm had swallowed Jackson whole. Inside his darkened chambers, Franklin sat behind his desk, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. A half-empty glass of bourbon glimmered beside a mountain of papers. Every ring of the phone made him flinch. Every buzz of his email carried another demand, another headline, another reprimand. He'd received 3 official notices already. 1 from the State Judiciary Board, 1 from the governor's office, and 1 from the Courier-Jackson, requesting an interview to discuss your side of the story. He'd ignored them all. His clerk entered quietly, her voice hesitant. "Sir, there's a protest outside your home." He didn't look up. "I'm aware. They have signs. Some reporters are there too. Then maybe they should be at work instead of playing activist." She hesitated. "There's also talk of a disciplinary hearing next week." That made him finally lift his head. "A hearing? For what? Enforcing order?" She looked at him, pity in her eyes. "For misconduct, sir." Franklin laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Misduct. "They're crucifying me for doing my job." But deep down, he knew the truth. The video didn't show a man enforcing order. It showed a man drunk on power, and the whole world had seen it. He turned toward the window. Down below, people were marching, holding signs that read, "Power doesn't excuse cruelty. She could be your grandmother." His jaw clenched. "Savages," he whispered. "All of them." Across town, Evelyn Carter sat in her living room surrounded by family. Her daughters had come bringing casseroles and love. Her grandchildren sat on the floor watching the TV coverage. She felt both pride and exhaustion. Pride that people cared that her pain had meaning, exhaustion because she never wanted to be a symbol. "Mama," said her eldest daughter, "Denise, they want you to speak at the rally tonight." Evelyn blinked. "A rally?" Denise nodded. "The community center's organizing it. People want to hear from you." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Hear from me?" "Oh, no, baby, I'm no speaker." Marcus, sitting beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "They don't need a speech, Mama. They just need your truth." She looked at him, her boy, the mayor, now juggling crisis and family in the same breath. His eyes were tired but full of resolve. "And what about you, Marcus? What are you going to do?" "I'm not stopping until he's held accountable." Her brow furrowed. "Be careful. Don't let anger make you forget who you are." He smiled faintly. "I learned everything I know about Grace from you." She reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Then remember that when the cameras come." By late afternoon, the courthouse lawn was a sea of people. Signs waved in the golden light. News vans hummed. The air smelled of sweat, asphalt, and anticipation. Evelyn stood behind the podium, flanked by Marcus and Rebecca. The crowd erupted when she appeared. "Evelyn! Evelyn!" they chanted, like her name itself was justice. She raised a hand, small, fragile, but steady. The noise dimmed. Her voice was quiet at first. "I'm not here to talk about hate. I've lived long enough to know hate burns everyone it touches." The crowd listened, utterly still. "I'm here to talk about dignity," she continued, "because no title, no robe, no gavel should ever strip someone of that. I went into that courtroom just trying to explain myself, and instead, I was made to feel like I didn't belong in my own town." Her eyes found the front row faces, young and old, black and white, tearful, defiant. "But I do belong here. We all do. Every last one of us." Applause thundered. Marcus wiped at his eyes discreetly. "And as for Judge Franklin," she said softly, "I pray he learns that humility is not weakness. It's strength." The crowd rose in a wave of cheers. Reporters scribbled, cameras rolled. The speech would play on every local channel by nightfall and on national networks by morning. Behind the crowd, an older man watched quietly from a parked car. His face was half in shadow, but his eyes burned with disbelief and rage. Franklin had come against his better judgment. He'd wanted to see the woman who had turned his life upside down. But what he saw wasn't an angry accuser. It was something far more dangerous. Grace. He slammed the car door and drove off, fury roaring in his ears. That night, Franklin's office was dark except for the glow of his computer screen. His inbox overflowed with hate mail and death threats. The phone rang again. He almost didn't answer, but the caller ID read, "Private line." He pressed it to his ear. "What?" "Judge Franklin," came the low, measured voice of Mayor Marcus Carter. Franklin froze. "Mr. Mayor, we need to meet." "There's nothing to discuss," Franklin said stiffly. "Oh, there's everything to discuss," Marcus replied. "You humiliated my mother in front of a courtroom. You think that doesn't concern me?" "I followed the law," Franklin said, voice shaking slightly. "Your mother was in contempt." "She was late for a bus," Marcus snapped. "You turned that into a spectacle." "I don't take orders from politicians," Franklin said. "Good," Marcus said, "because this isn't an order. It's a warning. Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you," Marcus said quietly, "that your badge, your title, your bench, none of it makes you untouchable. The people trusted you with their justice. You broke that trust. And they're watching. Franklin's throat tightened. You don't scare me. You should, Marcus said, then hung up. The line went dead. Franklin sat there, the silence pressing down like a vice. His hand shook as he reached for the bourbon again. His reflection in the glass looked older, smaller, beaten. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain began to fall, streaking the courthouse windows. He muttered to himself, "They'll forget. They always forget." But deep inside, he knew the truth this time. They wouldn't. Not with a mayor on their side, not with a video burned into the public's conscience. For the first time in his long career, Judge Franklin felt powerless, and that terrified him more than any protest ever could. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It poured over Jackson County like a baptism and a curse, washing the streets clean while the courthouse remained heavy with scandal. Judge William Franklin barely left his chambers. He lived on black coffee and resentment. The newspapers outside his door piled higher every morning, each headline another nail in the coffin of his reputation. Mayor's mother, humiliated in court. Judicial review opens against Franklin. Community demands removal. He flipped through one of them, muttering under his breath. Vultures, all of them. He could feel the walls closing in, the weight of the cameras, the whispers, the rumors. But underneath all that, another feeling had begun to gnaw at him. Something colder. Something that felt like fear. Because now it wasn't just the media after him. It was the system itself. The State Judicial Conduct Commission had sent notice of an ethics investigation. 2 of his fellow judges had called to express concern. One of them, Judge Morales, who'd shared bourbon with him on the golf course for 15 years, had even said, "Bill, maybe it's time to retire quietly. Save face." That phrase, "save face," had rattled in his skull all morning. He wasn't ready to be erased. Not like this. He slammed his fist onto the desk. "I won't crawl out like a coward." But the words felt hollow. His intercom buzzed. "Judge Franklin?" came his clerk's cautious voice. A visitor is here to see you." He frowned. "I told you no visitors. She said it's important." "Who?" A pause. Then, "Mrs. Carter's attorney, Rebecca Jameson." Franklin's chest tightened. "Send her in." Rebecca entered the office like she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. Her suit was soaked from the rain, hair damp, but her eyes were sharp. She carried a single manila folder. "Judge," she greeted coolly. He didn't stand. "You have a lot of nerve showing up unannounced. I tried requesting a meeting through proper channels," she said. You didn't respond. "I'm under no obligation to meet with you." "Maybe not," she said, walking closer. "But you might want to hear what's in this folder." He studied her for a beat, then leaned back. "Fine. Amuse me." Rebecca placed the folder on his desk and opened it slowly, sliding out a document stamped with the city seal. "Do you know what this is?" He squinted. "A complaint?" "Not just a complaint," she said. "A petition. Over 12,000 signatures requesting your suspension." He laughed, though it sounded forced. 12,000 hysterical people on the internet? Please. Rebecca's tone remained steady, including attorneys, clergy, business owners, and 3 sitting members of the county board. That made him pause. "You're bluffing." She slid another sheet forward. A list of names. Recognizable ones. Influential ones. "I'm not," she said. Franklin stared at it, his knuckles whitening around his pen. "I came here to offer you something," Rebecca said quietly. "A way out." He raised an eyebrow. "A threat disguised as kindness?" "A choice," she said. "Resign quietly, issue a public apology, and avoid disbarment, or keep fighting and watch everything burn." Franklin's eyes narrowed. "You think you can scare me?" "I don't need to," she said, turning to leave. "The truth will." Before she reached the door, he called after her. "Why are you doing this?" You think this makes you some kind of hero? She stopped, hand on the knob. No, she said softly. But it makes me human. Something you forgot how to be. Then she was gone. Franklin sat there for a long time after she left, the rain tapping against the window like a ticking clock. He wanted to dismiss her words as arrogance, but something about her tone had lodged deep under his skin. He poured another coffee, ignoring the cold. Then his phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. We need to talk. MC. He stared at it. MC. Only one person fit that signature. The mayor. Another text followed seconds later. Meet me at City Hall. Tonight. Alone. Franklin's instinct screamed no, but curiosity, pride, even overrode it. He typed back, fine. 8 p.m. The rain had turned the streets into mirrors by the time Franklin arrived at City Hall. The marble steps glistened under the streetlights. A security guard nodded him through after checking his ID. The building was quiet. Too quiet. He climbed to the second floor, his footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Through the glass walls, he could see the faint silhouette of Mayor Marcus Carter waiting in his office, facing the city skyline. When Franklin entered, Marcus didn't turn immediately. The room smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked air. "Judge," Marcus said at last, "I wasn't sure you'd come. I'm not in the habit of ignoring invitations from mayors," Franklin said dryly, "especially not when they come with veiled threats." Marcus turned, his expression unreadable. "No threats tonight, just truth." Franklin crossed his arms. "Then let's get to it." Marcus studied him for a moment before speaking. "Do you know who my mother was before all this?" Franklin frowned. "A retired teacher." "She wasn't just a teacher," Marcus said quietly. "She was one of the first black educators in this county to integrate public schools after the Civil Rights Act. She spent decades mentoring students who couldn't even afford their own books. She's been awarded more community honors than you've issued rulings." Franklin shifted uncomfortably. "That's irrelevant." "No," Marcus said, stepping closer. "It's not. Because when you yelled at her, you weren't just yelling at my mother. You were yelling at the entire generation that made your position possible." Silence stretched between them, sharp as glass. "You think you're protecting law and order?" Marcus continued. "But what you really protect is your ego. You mistake cruelty for control." Franklin's voice hardened. "I enforce the law." "No," Marcus said. "You enforced your pride." They stood face to face now, inches apart. Rain pattered against the windows like whispered judgment. For the first time, Franklin saw it. The fire in Marcus's eyes, the authority that came not from a robe or a bench, but from purpose. The same purpose Evelyn carried when she'd faced him, without hate. Marcus stepped back, his tone softening. "I'm not here to destroy you, Judge. I'm here to give you a chance to be better." Franklin blinked. "Better?" "Apologize," Marcus said. "Not because the cameras demand it, because your soul does." Franklin's mouth opened, then closed again. Words failed him. The mayor's voice wasn't threatening. It was almost pleading. "Do the right thing," Marcus said. "You've still got time." Franklin looked away, jaw clenched. "And if I don't?" Marcus's gaze hardened. "Then, time will run out." The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Then Marcus turned back to the window, dismissing him with silence. Franklin left without another word. But as he stepped out into the rain, something inside him cracked. Not fully broken. Not yet. But beginning to fracture under the weight of his choices. Because for the first time since the gavel struck, the judge felt something he didn't recognize anymore. Shame. The next morning broke heavy and gray, the kind of dawn that carried more silence than light. Jackson County lay under a shroud of fog, the courthouse dome barely visible through it. The storm had passed, but the air felt different, charged, expectant, like the city itself was holding its breath. Judge William Franklin sat at his kitchen table in his bathrobe, surrounded by the remnants of a sleepless night. Coffee gone cold, a half-eaten slice of toast, newspapers scattered like fallen soldiers. He'd read the headlines until his eyes blurred. Every word another blade. Mayor confronts judge in closed-door meeting. Apology demanded, accountability pending. Public hearing scheduled for Monday. Monday, 2 days away. That was when the state would decide if his career lived or died. He rubbed his temples, feeling the pulse of a headache he couldn't shake. His phone buzzed again. Dozens of messages, reporters, colleagues, old law school friends pretending to check in. But one stood out. Unknown number. Simple message. You should watch Channel 7. He hesitated, then grabbed the remote. The TV flickered to life. On screen, a live broadcast filled the room. Mayor Marcus Carter standing outside a small brick church surrounded by community members. And beside him, holding his arm with quiet grace, stood Evelyn. The crowd was smaller than the rallies had been, but the air around them felt heavier, more intimate. Candles flickered in the hands of those gathered. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "A prayer for justice. Evelyn Carter speaks." Franklin's throat tightened as he turned up the volume. Evelyn's voice, soft but steady, came through the speakers. "I was raised to believe in forgiveness. My mama taught me that bitterness only poisons the soul that holds it. But forgiveness," she paused, looking up toward the cloudy sky. "Forgiveness don't mean forgetting," the crowd murmured in agreement. "I don't hate that man," she continued, "but I do pity him, because somewhere along the way, he forgot what justice really means. It ain't power. It ain't shouting or shaming or reminding people who's in charge. Justice is mercy in motion. It's remembering that we're all just trying to stand before the same God, hoping he'll see us as worthy." Franklin leaned back, his breath shallow. He'd expected anger. He hadn't expected grace. Marcus stepped forward next, his voice calm but resonant. "This city is changing," he said. "We've been forced to look at who we are, and we can't unsee it. My mother didn't ask for this spotlight, but maybe the Lord put her there to show us something, that dignity is not a privilege handed down from a bench. It's a birthright." The crowd applauded softly, reverently. Then Evelyn added, "If that judge ever finds it in his heart to ask for forgiveness, I'll give it freely. Because mercy ain't something you earn, it's something you choose." Franklin turned off the television, his hands trembling. He stared at the blank screen, his reflection faint and hollow. Her words didn't humiliate him. They undid him. He sat there for a long while, listening to the distant hum of morning traffic, the ticking of the kitchen clock, the faint rustle of wind against the glass. Then, slowly, he stood. By afternoon, Judge Franklin walked through the courthouse doors again. Cameras flashed the moment he appeared, but for once, he didn't flinch. His usual scowl was gone, replaced by something quieter, something almost human. Inside, the echo of his shoes on the tile was met by murmurs of surprise. Some staff looked away, others stared openly. The bailiff at the security station hesitated, unsure whether to greet him or salute him. "Morning, Allen," Franklin said quietly, setting his briefcase on the scanner. The man blinked. "Morning, Judge." He climbed the steps to his chambers, each step feeling heavier than the last. On his desk waited the file for Monday's hearing, a thick packet of complaints, witness statements, ethics codes. He didn't open it. Instead, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never expected to use. It rang twice. "Mayor's office," came the receptionist's voice. "This is Judge Franklin," he said. "I'd like to speak to Mayor Carter." A pause. "Please hold." He waited, heartbeat hammering. Then Marcus's voice came through, measured, steady. "Judge." Franklin exhaled. "I saw the broadcast this morning." Marcus said nothing. "She's remarkable," Franklin murmured. "Yes," Marcus replied. "She always has been." "I want to meet her," Franklin said, face to face. Another pause. "Why?" "Because I owe her what I can't undo," Franklin said, "and because I don't want my last act as a judge to be silence." Marcus hesitated, then, "Come by my office at 5. My mother will be here." At 5 o'clock sharp, Franklin walked into City Hall. He wasn't in robes now, just a dark gray suit, his tie knotted neatly, his expression somber. The building's marble floors reflected his every step, and for the first time, he felt small walking across them. Marcus met him at the door, arms folded. "Judge." "Mr. Mayor," Franklin said. They regarded each other for a long moment. "She's in here," Marcus said, finally, opening the door to a private meeting room. Evelyn sat at the table, her hands folded neatly, her gold locket catching the afternoon light. When she looked up, her expression wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was steady, clear like water that had seen fire and survived it. Franklin hesitated, then took a seat across from her. The silence was heavy but not hostile. "I never imagined I'd sit here," he began quietly. "Not like this." Evelyn nodded. "Life has a way of humbling us when we need it most." He swallowed hard. "Mrs. Carter, I came here to say what I should have said weeks ago." She waited, patient. "I was wrong," he said, "not just for the way I spoke to you, but for what it revealed about me. I let pride wear the mask of authority. I let prejudice hide behind the robe of justice. And I humiliated a woman who deserved nothing but respect." His voice wavered. "I'm sorry. Truly." Evelyn studied him, her eyes kind but piercing. "Do you understand why it hurt?" "I do now," he said softly. "Because it wasn't just about you being late. It was about every time someone like me thought someone like you didn't belong in a place of power. I saw your skin before I saw your humanity." The words hung between them like a confession and a prayer. Then Evelyn reached across the table and placed her hand on his. Her touch was light, warm. "I forgive you," she said. Franklin's breath caught. He bowed his head, and for a moment he looked far older than his years. "Thank you," he whispered. Marcus stood quietly by the door, watching. Something inside him softened. For the first time, he saw not the tyrant who had yelled at his mother, but the broken man behind the robe. When Franklin rose to leave, Evelyn said, "What will you do now?" He paused. "The right thing, I hope." And with that, he left the room lighter than he'd entered. That night, a statement appeared on the courthouse website and every major outlet in the city. Effective immediately, I, Judge William Franklin, hereby resign from my position as county judge. I take full responsibility for my actions and extend my deepest apologies to Mrs. Evelyn Carter and the community I have disserved. May this moment remind us all that justice without empathy is not justice at all. By morning, the statement had gone viral. And for the first time in weeks, Jackson County woke not to outrage, but to quiet relief. The sun rose warm over Jackson County, gilding the courthouse dome with light. The air, still damp from days of rain, carried the scent of earth and renewal. For the first time in weeks, the city wasn't holding its breath. It was exhaling. At a small park 2 blocks from City Hall, the people of Jackson gathered, not to protest this time, but to celebrate. Fold-out chairs lined the grass, Children chased bubbles between clusters of reporters, and an elderly gospel choir hummed softly under the shade of an oak tree. The mood was lighter, though tinged with the kind of reverence born from shared struggle. Evelyn Carter sat in the front row beside her son. She wore a pale yellow dress, the gold locket gleaming against her chest. Every few minutes, someone approached neighbors, teachers, strangers to shake her hand or thank her. She smiled at each one, humble and warm, though a trace of disbelief lingered in her eyes. "I don't know why they're treating me like I did something special," she murmured to Marcus. He smiled. "Because you reminded them what decency looks like." She chuckled softly. "I just stood my ground. That's exactly what they needed to see." A few feet away, cameras were being set up for the official announcement. The press had been invited, but this wasn't politics, it was closure. The county council had called it a day of reflection. To everyone else, it was a homecoming of dignity. Rebecca Jameson, Evelyn's attorney, approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I see they upgraded the weather for you today," she joked. Evelyn laughed, taking the cup. "You sure this isn't a trick? No reporters hiding behind those bushes?" "Just community folks," Rebecca said, sitting down. "I think even the reporters came to listen, not stir trouble." Across the park, Marcus was already being pulled toward the podium, shaking hands and exchanging polite nods. He caught his mother's gaze and gave her a reassuring smile. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the cool wind lift a strand of gray hair from her cheek. It was strange how a moment of humiliation had turned into this gathering of hope. The irony wasn't lost on her. When Marcus stepped up to the podium, the crowd fell silent. His voice carried easily, rich and steady, honed by years of speeches. But this one, everyone could tell, came straight from his heart. "Good morning, Jackson County," he began. "A few weeks ago, our city was forced to face something ugly. We watched a moment that should never have happened, a moment that reminded us how easily power can lose sight of compassion. But today, we're not here to dwell on anger. We're here because one woman chose grace when the world expected fury." Applause rippled through the crowd. Evelyn shook her head gently, embarrassed, and Marcus smiled at her from the podium. "My mother taught me that dignity is something no one can take from you, not if you refuse to let them." She stood in that courtroom with humility and courage, and by doing so, she reminded us that justice isn't loud, it's steady, it's patient, it's kind. The gospel choir hummed softly, underscoring his words like a heartbeat. "Today," Marcus continued, "the council and I are proud to announce the creation of the Evelyn Carter Foundation for Civic Integrity, dedicated to promoting fairness, empathy, and accountability within our legal system. It will provide scholarships to young people entering law and public service, especially those from underrepresented communities. Because true justice begins not in a courtroom, but in the hearts of those who choose to serve." The applause swelled, rising like a tide. Evelyn pressed a hand to her lips, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Marcus looked out over the crowd, his voice lowering with emotion. "Let this be our turning point. Let's build a city where no grandmother, no teacher, no citizen ever feels small before the law again." The crowd rose to its feet. For a moment, Jackson County felt unified, raw, real, and new. Later that afternoon, after the cameras had packed up and the choir had finished their final hymn, Evelyn found herself walking the quiet path behind the park. The sound of the celebration drifted faintly on the breeze. She needed a few moments alone. Her steps led her to the courthouse steps, those same cold marble stairs that had once echoed with her shame. Now they were empty, clean, sunlit. For a long moment she stood there, staring up at the grand columns. The building looked the same, yet something in her had shifted. It no longer loomed. It simply stood, human and flawed, like the man who once sat inside, Mrs. Carter. The voice startled her. She turned, and there, standing awkwardly near the door, was William Franklin. He was out of his robe, dressed simply in a gray suit and carrying a worn leather briefcase. He looked older, thinner, as though the weight of his office had been holding him up all these years. "Judge Franklin," she said softly. He managed a faint smile. "Just Mr. Franklin now." They stood in silence for a moment, the air thick with all that had passed between them. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "I wasn't sure I'd have the courage," he admitted. "But I wanted to thank you, not for forgiving me, though I'll never stop being grateful for that, but for what you said afterward, about mercy, about remembering who we are." She studied him. "Have you found that man again? The one who forgot?" He let out a slow breath. "I'm trying. I've been volunteering at the community legal clinic downtown, free counsel for folks who can't afford it." "Feels different," from the bench. "That sounds like a good start," she said gently. He nodded. "It's strange, you know, losing everything you thought mattered and realizing you never really had peace until it was gone." She smiled. "Sometimes losing the crown is the only way to feel the weight lift." He chuckled softly, a sound both tired and sincere. "You have a gift for words, Mrs. Carter. Life gave me plenty of lessons to practice on." They stood for another quiet moment before Franklin extended his hand. "May I?" She looked at his hand, then took it firmly. "May you walk forward, not back," she said. His eyes glistened. "I intend to." And then he turned and walked down the courthouse steps, the same steps where reporters had once screamed his name in anger, disappearing into the light of a second chance. That evening, Evelyn sat on her porch, the hum of crickets filling the twilight. Her grandkids played on the lawn, chasing lightning bugs. Marcus joined her, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. He sat beside her, handing one over. "You did good today, Mama." "I didn't do nothing special," she said, smiling faintly. "I just showed up." He laughed softly. "Sometimes that's all the world needs to see someone show up with grace." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky fade from orange to blue. The world, at least for this evening, felt gentle. Evelyn looked down at her locket, opening it to the small picture inside her husband's smile, worn but kind. "You'd be proud of your boy," she whispered to the photo. "And maybe a little of me, too." Marcus leaned his head against her shoulder. "You ready to rest?" She smiled. "Maybe, but not yet. The world's still got a few lessons left to learn." The porch light glowed against the dark, warm, and steady. And in the heart of Jackson County, where justice had once faltered, something far greater had taken its place. Humility, humanity, and a grandmother's grace that had changed everything.